Hello, I'm Mike and welcome back to my sort of question and answer session where I answer questions that I've been asked about sort of degrees, physics degrees, doing physics, that sort of thing. And this time it's something a bit more simple, a bit more relaxed, and it's just the basic dumb advice for students. Not dumb as in the advice is dumb, but the really basic stuff that I'd recommend you do if you're going into being a student. The first thing that I'd say is hoard your stuff. Especially in first year, you're going to be in halls with a group of strangers. Things left in communal areas often go walkabout. Your stuff might get nicked. Don't be afraid to just say, no, I'm not telling anyone that I own this. Hide things. Keep things away, because it's very easy to get your stuff nicked when you are an idiot student and you are surrounded by strangers. As for things that I'd recommend you have, a box of tools is dead useful. If you can get something before your degree that will be of use to you, I would suggest a basic toolbox is probably one of the best things that you could get. So screwdrivers, including very importantly screwdrivers of the small size that works with sort of computing and with getting a sort of, so you can fix a computer or a laptop, open it up. That's basically vital because you will be living by the internet usually. Almost all your work for university will be through looking online. There'll be online course material. If you need to catch up on a lecture, your best bet is to try and find something online. And being able to sort of quickly fix that stuff is, well, it saves you from having to rely on the university's computing facilities all the time, which is really useful. Other obvious things, hammer is surprisingly good for fixing almost everything. You know, all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail, but it is true that there's so much that can be fixed just by hitting it with a hammer. Other bits for that toolbox, the other thing that I can recommend is make sure the case is good. Like, okay, fine, because the thing with that toolbox is, okay, fine, you've now got these tools, but they're all going to go missing if you're not careful. So decent toolbox, screwdrivers, hammer, good case to put them in that you know where it is. And also mark them. Find some way of making sure that you know these are yours. In my case, it was a bit of electrical tape wrapped around the handle of basically everything. Screwdriver, electrical tape around the handle. Hammer, bit of electrical tape around the handle. I know what colour it is. I know that's mine. I mean, there are other ways of doing it, but that way you have what I think is one of the most useful things, and you know it's yours. The other advice for things, like for a student to remember, and this I think is important, unless you are the most drunken idiot the world has ever seen, there is one major cost for when you're at university, and that is rent. Rent is going to be most of your expenses. And what that means is that when it comes to sort of balancing your budget, you'll get a whole load of useless advice, you know, cut down on the lattes that you don't drink anyway because you know that's bloody dumb. Right, you get a whole load of useless financial advice. The important bit, the bit that you really need to know is this. Work out how much you're spending on rent. That will be most of what your cost of living is. If your rent is reasonably under your sort of the amount of money you have, you should be fine. That's it. I mean, it's obvious when you think of it in terms of money. Like, if your rent comes to about sort of somewhere between £300 and £400 a month, which was sort of reasonable for where I was, then what else are you going to spend as one person that comes close to that? I mean, drinking, not really, unless you're drinking an absolutely massive amount. You're not going to spend £300 or £400 a month every month on booze unless you're an alcoholic, as far as I'm concerned. Food? No way. I mean, food, 20 quid a week is like, we'll get a decent bit of food. So food isn't even going to come close. It is rent. It is just, rent is the most, like, sizable chunk of your money. And if you control rent, you have pretty good handle on your finances just through that one decision. So the last sort of thing that I'd say, the dumb advice for students, is, okay, get a damn summer job. Again, so the big sort of output of money is rent, and the big input is your maintenance loan. You should be able to balance that fairly well. So if you want any extra money, that's now going to have to come from you working. The easiest way to work is going to be to find something to do over the course of that long summer that students get. That way your job is not in the way of you trying to complete your degree, because it's in that block where you're meant to be sort of doing other stuff. That's sort of fairly simple. I mean, where to? Well, if you're staying sort of at university or at home, the obvious places would be like just doing sort of bag packing, being a cashier, that sort of stuff. If you've got family who may be able to get you in somewhere, use that. I mean, because if you have it, it's cynical, but use it. You earn the money. Especially sort of in your penultimate year of university, there are often a lot of companies that might be taking on summer jobs for degree students. Have a look at them. Have a look what's being offered, because they will usually advertise through some place on the university. If you find out where that is, you can go into that. In my case, I did sort of a month or so of teaching at a couple of local schools, and that earned a decent chunk of money. But it is that. A summer job is probably the best way to do work around your degree. So that's the three sort of big dumb bits of advice I'd give to students. Perhaps that's fairly obvious, perhaps it was very obvious, but I think that was the point. You need to remember the obvious things. So anyway, thank you for listening to me ramble. Goodbye.